My grandmother died in March, and 3 weeks later, I started receiving phone calls from her number. I want to be clear about something before I explain what happened. Her phone had been disconnected. I confirmed this myself with the carrier the week after her funeral, closing out her account along with the rest of her affairs. The number was supposed to be dead, deactivated, no longer capable of making or receiving calls. The first call came at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I saw her name flash across my screen, exactly as it had been saved in my contacts for the past 15 years. And for one disoriented moment, my first instinct was simply to answer, the way you answer any familiar call. Before the reality caught up with me and my hand froze halfway to the phone, I let it go to voicemail. There was no message left. I told myself it was some kind of carrier error, a number briefly reassigned or glitching in some system somewhere before being fully wiped from the network. I didn't think much more about it, not seriously. Not yet. The second call came 4 nights later, at exactly the same time, 11 p.m. This time, I answered. There was no voice on the other end, just a long stretch of silence, followed by a faint sound I couldn't immediately place. A slow, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing, though it never quite resolved into anything I could confidently call breathing rather than static or interference. I said her name into the phone, feeling foolish even as I did it. Nothing responded. After nearly 30 seconds, the call disconnected on its own. I called the carrier again the next morning, more insistent this time, asking directly how a disconnected number could possibly generate outgoing calls. The representative checked their system thoroughly and told me, with what sounded like genuine confusion of her own, that the number showed no activity whatsoever on their end. No calls placed, no calls received. According to their records, nothing had happened at all. I asked her to explain how I had 2 calls logged on my own phone, then, from that exact number, at that exact time, 4 days apart. She had no explanation. She suggested, somewhat unconvincingly, that it might be a spoofing scam. Someone deliberately faking the caller ID to display a specific name and number. I wanted to believe that. It was, without question, the most rational explanation available. But something about it didn't sit right with me. Mostly because nobody outside my immediate family would have any reasonable way of knowing that specific number tied to that specific saved contact name in order to spoof it convincingly enough to fool me twice. The calls continued. Every 4 nights, at exactly 11 p.m., without fail, for the following month. I started recording them, hoping to eventually capture something more concrete than my own unreliable memory of static and silence. Most recordings captured exactly what I'd already experienced. Long silence, that same faint, rhythmic sound. Then disconnection after roughly 30 seconds. On the 5th call, something changed. Beneath the static, faintly, almost too quiet to be certain I hadn't imagined it entirely, I heard what sounded like 3 words, spoken so softly they were barely distinguishable from the surrounding noise. When I slowed the recording down afterward and isolated the audio as best I could, using a basic editing program, the words became slightly clearer, though still far from perfectly certain. Check the box. I didn't understand what that meant. My grandmother hadn't left any specific instructions about a box, not in her will, not in any conversation I could recall from her final months. I mentioned it to my mother, mostly out of a need to talk to someone about what was happening, without going into full detail about the calls themselves, which I still wasn't entirely sure I wanted to share so directly. My mother mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that there was in fact an old lockbox in my grandmother's closet, one nobody in the family had gotten around to opening yet during the process of clearing out her house. Nobody knew what was inside. Nobody had found a key. I drove to my grandmother's house the following weekend. The lockbox was exactly where my mother described, tucked in the back of a closet shelf, covered in a thin layer of dust that suggested it hadn't been disturbed in years, possibly longer than my grandmother's recent decline. I didn't have a key, and a locksmith we called out to the house took nearly 20 minutes working carefully to finally get it open. Inside, there were old photographs, some documents related to a life insurance policy nobody in the family had known existed, and a small, sealed letter with my name written on the front in my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting. The letter explained that she had taken out the policy years earlier without telling anyone, specifically because she worried certain other family members might contest it or cause complications if they knew about it while she was still alive. She wanted to make sure I found it eventually on my own terms, without unnecessary conflict or interference from anyone else. She had known, somehow, that I would need to find this box myself, specifically rather than leaving it to be discovered by someone else during a general house clearing. The calls stopped completely after that weekend. It's been 4 months now. Nothing since. I still don't have a rational explanation for the calls themselves, only for what they eventually led me to discover. The carrier maintains, to this day, that nothing was ever technically possible on their end. I've stopped calling them about it entirely, mostly because I no longer feel like arguing with someone whose system logs will never match my own phone's call history, no matter how many times I show them the recordings. Sometimes, late at night, I still glance at my phone around 11 p.m. out of habit, half expecting, half hoping to see her name appear one more time. Never has. But I've kept her number saved in my contacts anyway. I'm not entirely sure why. I think somewhere beneath the part of my mind that wants a rational explanation for everything, I'm not quite ready to fully let go of the possibility that some things, even after they're finished, still find a way to finish themselves properly first. If you've ever lost someone who left something unresolved behind, and you started noticing things that don't quite make sense in the weeks after, I'd encourage you to pay closer attention than you might normally think to give it. Some messages take longer to arrive than others, but they still find a way through, eventually, to the person who needs to hear them.